After 5 years of hard work, my father-in-law, the CEO, gave the partnership to his son, who'd only been there 3 months. I handed him my resignation with a calm smile. "Congrats to David," I said. When my father-in-law read my letter, he lost it. "You can't be serious?" he shouted, his face turning red as. Before we continue, subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab and let US know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Stephen O'Neill, and I used to believe in loyalty. 5 years ago, when I married Caroline Davenport, I thought I was joining more than just a family. I was becoming part of a legacy. Her father, Milton Davenport, owned Davenport Construction, one of the most respected firms in the tri-state area. What started as a small family business had grown into a multi-million-dollar empire under his leadership. I wasn't some gold digger looking for an easy ride. I had my MBA from Wharton and 3 years of experience at a prestigious consulting firm. When Milton offered me a position, I saw it as an opportunity to prove myself, not just coast on my wife's name. Caroline and I had met during our final year of business school, and what drew me to her wasn't her father's money. It was her sharp mind and ambitious spirit. Or, at least, that's what I thought at the time. "Stephen, I want you to understand something," Milton had told me on my first day, his weathered hands gripping his coffee mug. "In this business, blood might be thicker than water, but results are thicker than blood. You prove yourself here, and there's no limit to how far you can go." Those words became my gospel. I threw myself into every project with the intensity of a man possessed. While other employees left at 5, I stayed until 8. While they took weekends off, I was studying market reports and architectural plans. I transformed the company's digital infrastructure, streamlined operations, and personally brought in over $15 million in new contracts. The Davenport family dynamics were complex. Milton had 2 children, Caroline and her younger brother David. David was 28, 3 years younger than Caroline and me, but he'd chosen a different path. While Caroline had followed in the family tradition of business education, David had dropped out of college to pursue music. For the past 7 years, he'd been touring with various bands, living the bohemian lifestyle that horrified his father. "That boy has no sense of responsibility," Milton would grumble whenever David's name came up. 30 years old and still playing guitar in dive bars. When I was his age, I was building this company with my bare hands. Caroline always defended her brother. "Dad, not everyone wants the same things. David's happy. Happy doesn't pay the bills or build legacies," Milton would respond. I stayed out of those family disputes. My focus was on proving my worth through performance. And perform I did. In my second year, I identified a massive inefficiency in our subcontractor network that was costing us nearly $2 million annually. I restructured the entire system, personally negotiating new contracts that saved the company 30% on materials while actually improving quality. "Stephen, that was exceptional work," Milton had said after reviewing my presentation. "I'm promoting you to Senior Project Director." That promotion came with a significant salary increase and, more importantly, Milton's growing trust. He began including me in high-level strategic meetings, asking for my input on major decisions. I could see the path clearly, prove my value, earn respect, and eventually become a partner in the business I was helping to build. Caroline seemed proud of my success, though I noticed she'd been more distant lately. She'd started working late more often, taking mysterious phone calls she'd cut short when I entered the room. When I asked about it, she claimed it was just work stress from her position at the marketing firm downtown. "You're not the only one with ambitions, Stephen," she'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. By my 3rd year, I had transformed Davenport Construction's project management system entirely. We went from completing projects 15% over budget and behind schedule to finishing 10% under budget and ahead of deadline. Our client satisfaction scores reached an all-time high. Milton began openly referring to me as the future of this company. But it was in my 4th year that everything began to shift. David returned to town, claiming he was taking a break from the music scene to figure things out. He moved back into his childhood bedroom at the family estate and started spending time at the office, asking questions about the business. "I never realized how much this place had grown," David said during one of his frequent visits. He'd lean against my office doorframe, watching me work with curious eyes. "You've really made quite an impression on Dad." "I just do my job," I'd reply, not looking up from my computer. "Dad talks about you more than he talks about me," David said with a laugh that sounded forced. "Stephen this, Stephen that. Sometimes I wonder if he wishes you were his son instead of me." I should have paid more attention to the undertone in his voice. Should have recognized the seeds of resentment being planted. But I was too focused on the goal, partnership. Milton had been dropping hints for months about bringing in a new partner to help manage the company's expansion into commercial real estate. "The business is getting too big for one man to handle," he'd said during our quarterly review. "I need someone I can trust completely, someone who understands a vision." That someone was going to be me. I was certain of it. 5 years of 70-hour weeks, of missed family gatherings to close deals, of restructuring every aspect of operations. It was all building toward this moment. What I didn't know was that while I was building my future, others were building their own plans. Plans that didn't include me as anything more than a useful tool to be discarded once my purpose was served. The first crack in my carefully constructed world appeared on a Tuesday morning in early October, 3 months after David's return. I was reviewing the quarterly reports when Caroline called. "Stephen, can you come home early today? I need to talk to you about something important." Her voice sounded strange, strained in a way I hadn't heard before. "Is everything okay? Just please come home. We need to talk." I left the office at 4, something I rarely did, and drove home with a growing sense of unease. Caroline was waiting in our living room, pacing by the window. She looked up when I entered, her face pale and drawn. "Stephen, I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to be direct." She took a deep breath. "I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "Caroline, where is this coming from?" "I've been thinking about it for months. We've grown apart. You're never here, you're always working, and when you are here, all you talk about is the company. I feel like I'm married to Davenport Construction, not to you. That's not fair. Everything I've been doing is for us, for our future." "No, Stephen, it's for your future, your ambitions. I never wanted to be just an accessory to your career." We talked until midnight, but it was clear her mind was made up. She wanted a clean break, no contest, just a simple dissolution of marriage. We had no children, and she didn't want alimony, just her personal belongings and her car. "I hope you get what you want, Stephen," she said as I packed a bag to stay at a hotel. "I really do, but I can't wait around to see if you ever figure out what that actually is." I moved into a furnished apartment downtown, throwing myself even deeper into work to drown out the pain. Milton was surprisingly supportive. "I'm sorry things didn't work out with Caroline," he said, "but sometimes these things happen for a reason. Maybe now you can focus entirely on what matters, building something lasting." What matters? Building something lasting. His words felt like a lifeline. I doubled down on my efforts, working on a massive project that would cement Davenport Construction's reputation in the commercial sector. A $50 million mixed-use development that required every skill I developed over the past 5 years. For 3 months, I lived and breathed that project. I negotiated with city planners, coordinated with architects, managed a team of 40 subcontractors. I was so focused on proving that Caroline's leaving hadn't broken me, so determined to show Milton that his investment in me was worthwhile, that I missed all the signs of what was really happening. I missed the fact that David had been spending more time at the office, sitting in on meetings I wasn't invited to. I missed the quiet conversations that stopped when I entered a room. I missed the way Milton's assistant, Judith Evans, looked at me with something like pity in her eyes. I was so busy building my future that I didn't notice others were busy destroying it. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Wednesday morning in January. I arrived at the office to find David sitting in the conference room with Milton and 2 men in expensive suits I didn't recognize. Through the glass walls, I could see legal documents spread across the table. Judith looked up from her desk as I passed. "Stephen, Mr. Davenport wants to see you in his office at 10. That gave me an hour to wonder what was happening. I tried to focus on work, but my attention kept drifting to the closed conference room where the meeting continued. At exactly 10 o'clock, I knocked on Milton's door. "Come in, Stephen," Sit down. His tone was different, formal in a way it hadn't been in years. I have some news about the company's future direction. I sat across from his desk, the same chair where we'd had countless productive discussions about strategy and growth. But something felt different about the space today, as if an invisible wall had been erected between us. As you know, the company has been growing rapidly, thanks in large part to your excellent work. The commercial real estate expansion has been particularly successful. He paused, shuffling papers on his desk, which is why I've decided it's time to bring in a partner to help manage this growth. My heart rate accelerated. This was it, the moment I've been working toward for 5 years. I'm honored that you're considering. I'm making David a full partner, effective immediately. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. I stared at Milton, certain I had misheard. David? But he's only been working here for 3 months. David is my son, Stephen. This company has always been meant to stay in the family. Milton's voice was steady, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He's shown remarkable aptitude for the business in a very short time. Remarkable aptitude. In 3 months. While I had spent 5 years rebuilding this company from the ground up, Milton, I said carefully, I've dedicated the last 5 years to this company. I've increased profits by 40%, streamlined operations, brought in over $30 million in new business. And I'm grateful for all of that, which is why I'm not letting you go. You'll continue in your current role, reporting to David as the new managing partner. Reporting to David, the man who 3 months ago didn't know the difference between gross and net profit margins. I need some time to think about this, I said, standing up. Of course. Take all the time you need. I walked back to my office in a daze. 5 years. 5 years of my life, of missed opportunities, of sacrificing my marriage to this altar of ambition. And for what? To be told that blood trumps performance, that loyalty means nothing when measured against family ties. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, pulling up the files that contain my life's work for this company. Every system I'd implemented, every process I'd improved, every relationship I'd built. It was all there, documented in meticulous detail. That's when I realized something that Milton apparently hadn't considered. I wasn't just an employee who could be easily replaced. I was the institutional memory of every major improvement made in the last 5 years. I was the architect of the systems that kept this company running efficiently. I was the relationship holder with our biggest clients. I was irreplaceable, and they had just made a catastrophic error in judgment. I spent the rest of the day in apparent normalcy, attending meetings and responding to emails. But underneath the surface, I was conducting an audit, not of the company's finances, but of my own value and leverage. By the time I left the office at 6, I had a complete picture. I personally managed relationships with clients representing 60% of our annual revenue. The digital systems I'd implemented were so customized to my specifications that no one else fully understood how they worked. The project management methodology that had revolutionized our efficiency was entirely my creation, documented in files that only I had access to. Most importantly, I had been the primary point of contact for the $50 million mixed-use development project, the largest contract in the company's history. A project that was scheduled to begin construction in 3 weeks. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called old contact from my consulting days. By the end of the night, I had 3 job offers, each with a salary 20% higher than what I was currently making. But job security wasn't what I was after. I wanted something else entirely. The next morning, I walked into Milton's office with a single sheet of paper in my hand. Stephen, have you given thought to what we discussed yesterday? I have. I placed the paper on his desk. This is my resignation letter, effective in 2 weeks. Milton's face went white as he read the brief, professional letter. Stephen, let's talk about this. I know yesterday was a shock, but there's nothing to discuss, Milton. You made your choice. I'm making mine. I smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time in months. Congratulations to David on his partnership. I'm sure he'll do great things. I turned to walk away, but Milton's voice stopped me. You can't be serious. You're throwing away everything you've built here. His face was turning red, veins visible on his forehead. 5 years of your life, Stephen. 5 years. Exactly. I said, still smiling. 5 years of my life that apparently meant nothing when measured against 3 months of family connection. Wait, just wait. Let me think about this. Maybe we can work something out. Maybe there's a different arrangement. I'll spend the next 2 weeks transitioning my responsibilities as best I can. I'll make sure David has access to all the files he'll need. I paused at the door. Though, I should mention, the Harmon development contract requires my personal signature on all major decisions. You might want to check with legal about how to handle that transfer. I left Milton staring at the resignation letter, his hands shaking slightly as the implications began to sink in. The Hartman Development Project wasn't just the company's largest contract. It was the cornerstone of their expansion into commercial real estate, a project that I had personally negotiated, structured, and managed from conception to near completion. A project where my signature was legally required on every major decision. A project that, if handled incorrectly, could bankrupt Davenport Construction. I spent the rest of the morning documenting my responsibilities, creating detailed transition notes for every project I managed. I was nothing if not professional. But professionalism didn't mean I was going to make their transition easy. Every document I created was technically complete, but practically useless. I listed every task that needed to be completed, but didn't explain the context that made those tasks critical. I provided contact information for every client, but didn't mention the personal relationships and unwritten agreements that kept those clients happy. Most importantly, I documented every aspect of the Hartman project, except for the informal understandings I had reached with the client about timeline flexibility and cost adjustments. Understandings that weren't written down anywhere because they were based on personal trust built over months of relationship management. By lunchtime, word had spread through the office that I was leaving. The reactions were exactly what I expected. Shock from the employees who understood my value, confusion from those who didn't, and barely concealed panic from the senior staff, who knew how much of the company's operations ran through my oversight. David appeared at my office door around 2 o'clock. "Stephen, I heard about your resignation. I hope this isn't because of the partnership decision." I looked up from my computer, taking in his carefully arranged expression of concern. "Not at all, David. Congratulations again. I'm sure you'll do great things. Look, I know this is awkward, but I'd really appreciate your help in getting up to speed on everything. Maybe we could grab dinner tonight, and you could walk me through the major projects?" "I'm afraid I can't tonight, but I've been preparing detailed transition documents. You'll have everything you need. Everything you need, but not everything you'll want," I thought to myself. David lingered in the doorway. "The Hartman project, Dad mentioned something about your signature being required?" "That's correct. It's written into the contract. All major decisions require the signature of the designated project manager, which is currently me. But surely they can be transferred. I'm sure your lawyers will figure out the best way to handle it." I turned back to my computer screen. I really do need to focus on these transition documents. He left, but I could feel his eyes on me through the glass wall of my office for the rest of the afternoon. At exactly 5 o'clock, I saved my final transition document, backed up my personal files to a secure external drive, and began packing my personal belongings. 5 years of my professional life fit into 2 cardboard boxes. Some books, a few awards, a photo of Caroline and me from happier times that I immediately threw away. As I carried the boxes to my car, I thought about what came next. I had job offers, I had savings, I had skills that were in demand. But more than that, I had something else, complete knowledge of how to systematically dismantle everything I'd built. The question wasn't whether I would use that knowledge. The question was how far I was willing to go. As I drove away from Davenport Construction for the second to last time, I already knew the answer. My final 2 weeks at Davenport Construction were a masterclass in malicious compliance. I did exactly what was asked of me. Nothing more, nothing less. I created transition documents that were technically complete, but strategically useless. I trained my replacement on the basic functions of the systems I'd built while carefully avoiding the nuances that made them work efficiently. Most importantly, I watched David fumble through meetings with the bemused expression of someone who had no idea how far and over his head he was. "Stephen, Milton cornered me in the break room during my final week. I need to ask you something directly. Are you sabotaging this transition?" I looked up from my coffee with genuine surprise. Milton, I've done everything you asked. I've documented every process, trained David on every system, prepared detailed notes on every client relationship. If there are specific concerns, I'm happy to address them. The Hartman Project team is saying you haven't been responding to their emails about the timeline adjustments. I respond to every email within 24 hours. However, I may not have the authority to make the decisions they're asking about, given that David is now the managing partner. Milton's jaw tightened. Stephen, please. This project is critical to the company's future. I understand that, which is why I've been so thorough in documenting everything for David's review. What I didn't mention was that everything included only the official project requirements, not the informal agreements I'd made with the client. Agreements that had kept them happy when we'd encountered the inevitable construction delays and cost overruns that plagued every major project. The Hartman development team was expecting the personal touch they'd grown accustomed to, the immediate responses to concerns, the creative problem solving, the relationship management that had kept a $50 million project running smoothly. Instead, they were getting referred to David, who was still learning the difference between load-bearing walls and partition walls. On my final day, I cleaned out my desk while David watched nervously from the conference room, where he was attempting to manage his first major client meeting. Through the glass, I could see him shuffling through papers, clearly struggling to answer questions that should have been routine. Mr. O'Neill, Judith appeared at my desk. Could I speak with you privately? I followed her to an empty office. She closed the door and turned to face me with an expression I'd never seen from the usually professional assistant. I need to tell you something, but I need your word that you won't reveal how you found out. You have it. She took a deep breath. The partnership decision wasn't just about family. Caroline has been having an affair with David for 8 months. Milton found out 3 weeks ago. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down heavily in the nearest chair, my mind reeling. 8 months. That means it started before your divorce papers were filed. She left you for him, Stephen. And when Milton found out, David convinced him that making him a partner was the only way to make things right for the family. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Caroline's distance in the months before a divorce, her mysterious phone calls, her sudden desire for a quick, uncontested separation, David's return to town, and sudden interest in the family business. Why are you telling me this? Judith looked out the window at the construction site where we were building our latest project. Because I've worked for this family for 15 years, and I've never seen Milton make a decision this stupid. David doesn't care about this company. He just wanted to impress Caroline. And she doesn't care about either of them. She just wanted financial security without having to work for it. How do you know all this? I schedule Milton's appointments, manage his calendar, handle his personal matters. I see everything, Stephen, including the private investigator's report he commissioned when he suspected something was wrong. She handed me a manila envelope. Copies of everything. Photos, financial records, communication logs. David has been using company funds to pay for expensive gifts for Caroline, jewelry, vacations, even a new car. Technically embezzlement, though Milton has been covering it up to avoid scandal. I stared at the envelope, feeling a cold fury building in my chest. Not just betrayal, systematic, calculated betrayal designed to steal 5 years of my life while using my own work to finance their affair. What are you going to do with this information? Judith asked. I looked up at her, and she took a step back at whatever she saw in my expression. I'm going to make them pay for every lie they told, every moment they stole from me, every dollar they used to fund their betrayal. Stephen, don't worry, Judith. I won't involve you in what comes next, but you might want to start looking for another job. This company is about to face some serious challenges. I left Davenport Construction that afternoon with more than just my personal belongings. I had a complete understanding of exactly how thoroughly I'd been betrayed and exactly how to make everyone involved pay the price. That evening, I sat in my apartment with the private investigator's files spread across my kitchen table. Photos of Caroline and David at expensive restaurants. Credit card statements showing charges for hotel rooms and jewelry. bank records showing transfers from company accounts to cover personal expenses. But what interested me most wasn't the evidence of their affair. It was the evidence of their stupidity. They'd been careless, leaving digital footprints everywhere. David had used his company email to make reservations. Caroline had posted social media photos from locations that corresponded with charges on the company credit card. They'd been so confident that Milton would cover for them, so certain that I would never find out, that they'd documented their own betrayal in excruciating detail. I opened my laptop and began making calls. First to Jeff Kern, my former colleague who now ran his own consulting firm. Then to Clinton Horton, a corporate lawyer I'd worked with on several major projects. Finally to Kelvin Moran, a private investigator who specialized in corporate matters. By midnight, I had assembled a team of professionals who understood exactly what I wanted to accomplish. Not just revenge, systematic destruction of everything my betrayers had built their future on. The key, I explained to them during our first meeting, is that they used my work to finance their betrayal. Every system I built, every client relationship I developed, every process I implemented, they're planning to use all of it to support their new life together. And you want to take it all away, Jeff said. I want to burn it to the ground and salt the earth so nothing ever grows there again. Clinton leaned forward. Stephen, I need to be clear about the legal risks. Everything we do will be perfectly legal. I'm not interested in breaking laws. I'm interested in using every legal tool available to destroy people who betrayed me. Kelvin pulled out a tablet and began taking notes. What's the timeline? I smiled, the same calm smile I'd given Milton when I resigned. They're planning to get married in June, using David's partnership profits to finance a wedding that will cost more than most people make in a year. I want them broke, unemployed, and facing serious legal consequences by then. That's ambitious, Clinton said. I have 5 years of detailed knowledge about every aspect of that company's operations, every client relationship, every process inefficiency, every regulatory compliance issue they've been ignoring. I know exactly where the bodies are buried because I'm the one who buried most of them. I pulled out a folder containing my own documentation. And I have something else, a complete backup of every system I built, every process I designed, every client contact I developed. Information that will be very valuable to their competitors. Jeff whistled low. You're not just planning to leave. You're planning to take the entire foundation of their business with you. They made a choice to betray someone who had given them everything. Now, they get to live with the consequences of that choice. I looked around the table at the 3 men who would help me execute the most comprehensive revenge plan I could imagine. Gentlemen, we have 5 months to completely destroy 3 lives. I suggest we get started. Outside, snow was beginning to fall on the city where I had spent 5 years building someone else's dreams. But those dreams were about to become nightmares, and I was going to enjoy every moment of watching them burn. The war began quietly, with the kind of strategic precision that had made me successful at Davenport Construction. But this time, instead of building systems, I was dismantling them. My first target was the Hartman Development Project, the $50 million contract that represented 40% of Davenport's annual revenue. As the original project manager, I knew every weakness in their approach, every corner they'd cut, every promise they'd made that they couldn't keep. More importantly, I knew Marcus Hartman personally. Stephen, Marcus greeted me warmly when I called to request a lunch meeting. I heard you left Davenport. That's a shame. You were the only one over there who really understood our vision. That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you, Marcus. I think there are some things you should know about how your project is being handled now. We met at his private club downtown, the kind of place where deals worth hundreds of millions were discussed over perfectly prepared steaks. Marcus was a 4th-generation real estate developer who had built his reputation on projects that came in on time and under budget. He did not tolerate incompetence. I'll be direct, Marcus. David Davenport is not qualified to manage a project. He has 3 months of construction experience and no background in commercial development. Milton gave him the position for personal reasons that have nothing to do with your project's success. Marcus set down his fork, his expression growing serious. What kind of personal reasons? I slid a folder across the table. David is having an affair with my ex-wife. Milton made him a partner to keep in the family. Your $50 million project is being managed by someone whose primary qualification is sleeping with the right person. Marcus opened the folder and examined the documentation I prepared. Photos of David and Caroline together, financial records showing his lack of experience, copies of emails where David demonstrated fundamental misunderstandings of basic construction principles. This is concerning, Stephen. But what exactly are you proposing? I'm starting my own consulting firm. I have the experience, the relationships, and the knowledge to complete your project better than Davenport ever could. Let me audit their current progress and show you exactly what you're not getting for your money. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me with calculating eyes. And what do you get out of this? The satisfaction of ensuring your project is handled by someone who actually cares about the outcome. 3 days later, Marcus Hartman requested a comprehensive project review meeting with Davenport Construction. He brought his own team of engineers and architects, professionals I had quietly briefed on exactly what questions to ask. I watched the meeting through the conference room's glass walls, positioned at my temporary desk where I was finishing transition documents. David sat at the head of the table, sweating visibly as the Hartman team systematically exposed every gap in his knowledge. Mr. Davenport, one of the engineers, said, "The foundation specs show a deviation from the original plans. Can you explain the engineering rationale for this change?" David shuffled through papers, clearly searching for an answer he didn't have. The original plans were adjusted for efficiency purposes. Efficiency purposes? This change reduces the building's load capacity by 15%. That's not efficiency. That's a potential structural failure. Milton tried to intervene, but Marcus cut him off. "I want to hear from the project manager." "David, walk me through your quality control process." What followed was 20 minutes of painful fumbling as David revealed that he had no quality control process, no understanding of regulatory requirements, and no grasp of the timeline implications of the decisions he'd been making. "I think we've heard enough," Marcus said finally. "Milton, I'm invoking the performance review clause in our contract. Davenport Construction has 30 days to demonstrate competent project management, or we'll be terminating this agreement and seeking damages for the delays and substandard work completed so far." The meeting ended with handshakes that felt like funeral preparations. As the Hartman team filed out, Marcus caught my eye and nodded almost imperceptibly. That afternoon, Milton appeared at my temporary desk with desperation in his eyes. "Stephen, I need your help. The Hartman review was a disaster. David, he's not ready for this level of responsibility." "I'm sorry to hear that, Milton, but my transition period ended yesterday. I'm no longer an employee of Davenport Construction. Please, just consult on this one project. We'll pay you whatever you want." I pretended to consider the offer. "I appreciate the offer, Milton, but I've already committed to other opportunities. However, I do have some advice. Anything. Fire David before he destroys everything you've built. Admit the partnership was a mistake, bring in someone qualified, and hope Marcus Hartman is willing to work with competent management." Milton's face went pale. "I can't fire David. The family situation, it's complicated. Then you're going to lose the Hartman project. And once word gets out that Davenport Construction can't handle major commercial development, you'll lose a lot more than that." I gathered my final personal items and stood to leave. "Good luck, Milton. You're going to need it." But my conversation with Milton was just the opening move. That evening, I met with my assembled team to review the progress on our broader strategy. "The Hartman project is critical," I explained to Jeff, Clinton, and Kelvin. "But it's just the first domino. We need to systematically undermine their relationships with every major client." Jeff pulled out his laptop. "I've been analyzing the client list you provided. 12 companies represent 80% of their revenue. If we can create doubt about Davenport competence with just 3 or 4 of them, the ripple effect will be devastating." "How do we do that?" Kelvin smiled grimly. "The same way we handle Hartman. You provide inside knowledge of each client's specific concerns and expectations. I document David's incompetence in dealing with those concerns. Jeff reaches out through his business network to plant seeds of doubt. And I handle the legal aspects," Clinton added. making sure everything we do is completely legitimate while maximizing the damage to their business relationships. What about Caroline? I asked. Kelvin opened another folder. She's been busier than we thought. Apparently, her affair with David wasn't her first extramarital adventure. She had at least 2 other relationships during her marriage, including a 6-month affair with her boss at the marketing firm. I felt a familiar cold anger building in my chest. Evidence, hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even some very indiscreet text messages her boss kept on his phone. She's not nearly as careful as she thinks she is. The boss, does he know about David? No. In fact, he seems to think Caroline left you for him. He's been planning to leave his wife and marry Caroline himself. Jeff laughed bitterly. So she's playing multiple men against each other while they all think they're her one true love. That gives us options, Clinton said. We could expose the whole network of affairs. Let them all destroy each other. I considered the possibilities. Caroline had built her new life on a foundation of lies and manipulation, using men who cared about her to finance her lifestyle while she searched for the best long-term option. She thought she was clever, playing different men against each other without any of them knowing about the others. She was about to learn that deception was a game that could be played by experts. Here's what we're going to do, I said. We're going to give Caroline exactly what she deserves. The chance to explain her choices to all the men she's been manipulating simultaneously. Ow! I smiled, feeling the same cold satisfaction I'd experienced when I resigned from Davenport Construction. We're going to throw her a surprise party. 2 months into my campaign, Davenport Construction was hemorrhaging clients. The Hartman project had been officially terminated, with Marcus citing fundamental management incompetence in his written notice. 3 other major clients had requested project reviews that exposed similar gaps in David's capabilities. But the real masterpiece was yet to come. I had been carefully orchestrating a series of events that would expose Caroline's web of deception in the most public and humiliating way possible. Through Kelvin's investigation and my own strategic planning, I had identified all the key players in her elaborate manipulation scheme. David Davenport, her current target, the one she was planning to marry for his partnership money. Neil Maloney, her boss at the marketing firm, who believed Caroline had left me for him and was planning to divorce his wife to marry her. Carlos Stanley, a wealthy client of her marketing firm who had been lavishing expensive gifts on Caroline under the impression that she was single and available. 3 men, each convinced he was Caroline's true love, each planning a future that Caroline had no intention of honoring. They were about to meet each other. The setup required delicate timing. I had Kelvin create false social media accounts to anonymously tip each man off about Caroline's surprise birthday party at the Riverside Country Club. Each received information suggesting that Caroline would be thrilled if he showed up to surprise her. What none of them knew was that Caroline wasn't having a birthday party. She was having dinner with David to finalize their wedding plans. I positioned myself at the bar with a clear view of the dining room, waiting for the fireworks to begin. David and Caroline arrived first, settling into a corner table where they immediately began discussing wedding venues and guest lists. They looked happy, relaxed, the picture of a couple planning their future together. Neil Maloney arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a bouquet of expensive roses and looking around for Caroline's birthday party. When he spotted her having an intimate dinner with another man, his face went through a fascinating range of expressions: confusion, recognition, anger. Carlos Stanley appeared just as Neil was approaching Caroline's table. Carlos was carrying a jewelry box that undoubtedly contained something extremely expensive. He saw Caroline with David and Neil approaching, and his businessman's instincts immediately recognized what was happening. What followed was the most beautiful implosion I had ever witnessed. Caroline, Neil's voice carried across the dining room. What's going on here? Caroline looked up from her menu and went completely white. Neil, what are you doing here? I came for your birthday party, though it looks like you're celebrating something else entirely. David stood up, confusion evident on his face. Caroline, who is this? I could ask you the same question, Carlos said, approaching the table with the cold smile of a man who had just realized he'd been played. Caroline, I thought you said you were single. The conversation that followed was everything I had hoped for and more. Three men discovering simultaneously that the woman they loved had been manipulating all of them. Caroline trying desperately to explain away the unexplainable. The growing realization among her victims that they had been nothing more than financial resources to be exploited. "You told me you divorced Stephen because you realized you loved me," Neil said, his voice rising. "You told me you were waiting for the right man to settle down with," Carlos added. "You told me we were soulmates," David said, his voice breaking slightly. Caroline tried to salvage the situation, but she was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Each man had evidence of her promises, her lies, her manipulation. The jewelry, the expensive dinners, the hotel rooms, all funded by men who believed they were investing in a future with someone who actually cared about them. The confrontation lasted 30 minutes, ending with all three men walking away in disgust while Caroline sat alone at the table, her carefully constructed web of deception in ruins around her. But I wasn't finished with her yet. The next morning, I implemented the second phase of Caroline's punishment. Kelvin had discovered that she had been using her position at the marketing firm to embezzle small amounts from client accounts. Never enough to trigger audits, but enough to fund her expensive lifestyle. Armed with documentation of her financial crimes, I arranged for an anonymous tip to be sent to her company's compliance department. By noon, Caroline had been fired and was facing potential criminal charges. David, meanwhile, was dealing with his own crisis. With the Hartman project terminated and 3 other major clients expressing concerns about Davenport Construction's competence, the company was facing its first quarterly loss in 15 years. Milton was finally beginning to understand the true cost of his nepotistic decision. "Stephen," Milton called me that afternoon, "I need to ask you something directly. Are you behind what's happening to us?" "I'm not sure what you mean, Milton." The client complaints, the project reviews, the sudden scrutiny of David's qualifications. It all started after you left. Maybe clients are just noticing things they didn't pay attention to before. "Damn it, Stephen. This company is failing because of what you're doing. This company is failing because you chose family loyalty over competence. I didn't make David unqualified to manage major projects. I didn't make Caroline a liar and a cheat. I didn't make you choose nepotism over merit." There was a long silence on the phone. "What do you want, Stephen? What will it take to stop this?" "I don't want anything from you, Milton. I'm simply letting the market decide what Davenport Construction is worth without my contributions. If that's destroying your business, perhaps you should consider what that says about your decision-making process." I hung up the phone and immediately called Jeff to coordinate the next phase of our plan. "The construction industry is smaller than people realize," I explained to my team that evening. "Word travels fast about companies that can't deliver on their promises. David's incompetence is becoming common knowledge, which means other firms are going to start poaching Davenport's remaining clients. And you're going to help them do that," Jeff said. "I'm going to make it very easy for clients to understand why they should switch to more competent firms. Firms that happen to employ consultants who understand their specific needs and expectations." Kelvin pulled out his latest surveillance report. "Caroline's been trying to contact David, but he's not returning her calls. Apparently, discovering that your fiancé has been manipulating multiple men simultaneously tends to damage the relationship. What about her legal situation? The embezzlement charges are moving forward. She's hired a lawyer, but the evidence is pretty damning. She's looking at potential jail time and definitely financial ruin." Clinton leaned forward. "Stephen, I need to ask, are you sure you want to go this far? Caroline's life is essentially destroyed at this point. I thought about 5 years of my life sacrificed to build someone else's dreams. About a marriage dissolved because of lies and manipulation. About trust betrayed and loyalty rewarded with contempt." I stood up and gathered the folder. "You have 24 hours to resign from Davenport Construction and make full restitution for what you've stolen. If you don't, this evidence goes to the police, the state attorney general, and the IRS." Judith was crying now, her carefully constructed facade of righteousness crumbling. "Please, Stephen, I have children. I have a mortgage. You should have thought about that before you decided to become a criminal." I left her sitting at the coffee shop, understanding for the first time that she had been manipulated just as thoroughly as everyone else in this web of betrayal and revenge. By the end of that week, Davenport Construction had effectively ceased to exist. The regulatory violations had resulted in license suspension. The client defections had eliminated revenue. The embezzlement charges against multiple employees had created a scandal that made the company untouchable in the industry. Milton was facing personal bankruptcy, criminal charges for endangering public safety, and the complete destruction of the business his father had built. David was unemployable in the construction industry and facing potential criminal liability for the safety violations that had occurred under his management. Caroline was working as a waitress in a diner on the other side of town, unable to afford a lawyer for her continuing legal problems and facing the possibility of jail time. Judith had resigned in disgrace and was cooperating with authorities to avoid prosecution, which meant providing evidence against Milton that would likely result in additional criminal charges. For lives completely destroyed. 5 years of my dedication and loyalty avenged in the most thorough way possible. But revenge, I was learning, was like a drug. The more you had, the more you wanted. And I wasn't quite finished yet. 6 months after my resignation from Davenport Construction, I stood in the empty lobby of what had once been their corporate headquarters. The bankruptcy auction was scheduled for the following week, and everything Milton had built over 30 years would be sold to pay his creditors. But I hadn't come to gloat over the ruins of my enemies. I had come to collect something that belonged to me. Stephen. Milton's voice echoed in the empty space. He looked 20 years older than when I'd last seen him, gray-haired, hollow-eyed, defeated. What are you doing here? I came to make you an offer, Milton. He laughed bitterly. I don't have anything left to sell. You have something I want. Information about David and Caroline's current situation. Milton's eyes narrowed. You're still going after them? Isn't destroying my life enough revenge for you? David and Caroline haven't paid the full price for their betrayal yet. They're still alive, still free, still able to build new lives somewhere else. That's not acceptable. Stephen, please. Enough people have been hurt. My company is gone. My reputation is destroyed. I'm facing criminal charges that could put me in prison. David can't find work anywhere, and Caroline is barely surviving. Isn't that enough? I looked around the empty lobby where I had once walked with pride, where I had believed in loyalty and hard work and merit-based success. 5 years, Milton. 5 years of my life dedicated to building your company while your son was sleeping with my wife and planning to steal everything I'd earned. You want me to stop now because you think they've suffered enough? They made mistakes. They made choices, deliberate, calculated choices to betray someone who trusted them. Now they get to live with the consequences of those choices until the day they die. I pulled out a folder containing information I'd gathered about David and Caroline's current circumstances. David is working construction labor for minimum wage under a false name in Seattle. Caroline is waitressing in Portland while fighting embezzlement charges. They thought they could disappear and start over somewhere else. Milton stared at the documentation. How did you find them? The same way I found out about their affair. By being more thorough and more determined than they are clever. What do you want from me? I want you to call them. Tell them to meet you here tomorrow night. Tell them you have a proposal that could help them start over. And then what? I smiled. The same cold smile I perfected over the past 6 months. Then they get to learn what happens to people who think they can escape the consequences of betraying me. Milton shook his head. I won't help you hurt them any more than you already have. You don't have a choice, Milton, because if you don't make those calls, I'll make sure the federal prosecutors investigating your safety violations receive some additional evidence that could turn your potential 5-year sentence into a guaranteed 20-year sentence. I showed him a second folder containing documentation of safety violations I had discovered but hadn't yet reported, violations that had occurred during his tenure, not David's. Violations that could be interpreted as willful endangerment of workers and the public. Milton's face went white as he reviewed the evidence. This is extortion. This is justice. You enabled David's affair with my wife. You chose family politics over competence. You betrayed 5 years of my loyalty and dedication. Now you get to be the instrument of their final punishment. What are you planning to do to them? I'm going to give them exactly what they gave me. Complete betrayal by someone they trust, followed by the systematic destruction of everything they think they've built. Milton was silent for a long moment, staring at the evidence that could send him to federal prison for the rest of his life. Make the calls, Milton. Tonight. The next evening, I waited in the darkened Davenport construction offices, hidden behind what had once been my desk. Milton sat in the conference room, nervous and defeated, waiting for his children to arrive. David entered first, looking thin and worn down by months of manual labor. He was followed by Caroline, who had clearly struggled with the transition from her former lifestyle to minimum wage survival. "Dad," David said, confusion evident in his voice. "Why did you want to meet here?" "I have a proposal," Milton said, his voice shaking slightly. "A way for both of you to start over with clean slates." Caroline sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs. "What kind of proposal?" "There's someone who has been orchestrating the destruction of our family. Someone who has been systematically destroying our lives out of revenge." David leaned forward. "What are you talking about?" "Stephen O'Neill, your ex-husband," Milton said to Caroline. "He's been behind everything that's happened to us. The client complaints, the regulatory violations, the evidence that destroyed your career, Caroline. All of it was planned and executed by Stephen." I watched from the shadows as understanding dawned on their faces. "That's impossible," Caroline said. "Stephen wouldn't. Stephen has spent the last 6 months destroying everything we care about because he found out about your affair. He's been playing a game of revenge that we didn't even know we were part of." David slammed his hand on the table. "That bastard." I knew something was off about how everything fell apart so quickly. "The question," Milton continued, "is what we're going to do about it." Caroline made her choices when she decided to cheat on me with David while using my success to finance their affair. David made his choices when he decided to use nepotism instead of competence to advance his career. Milton made his choices when he decided family politics were more important than merit. I looked around the table at the 3 professionals who had helped me execute the most comprehensive revenge plan I could imagine. They wanted to take everything I built and use it for their own purposes. Now they get to discover what life looks like when everything they thought they had is taken away. Outside, spring was coming to the city where I had once believed in loyalty and hard work. But I had learned that some lessons can only be taught through consequences, and some people can only understand justice when they experience it personally. The final phase of my plan was about to begin. 3 months after the restaurant confrontation, Caroline's life had completely collapsed. The embezzlement charges had resulted in a plea bargain that required full restitution plus fines, money she didn't have. Her apartment lease had been terminated due to non-payment, and she was living in a studio apartment in the worst part of town. David's partnership at Davenport Construction had become a liability rather than an asset. The company had lost 60% of its major clients, and Milton was facing the possibility of bankruptcy for the first time in 30 years. David's engagement to Caroline had ended when he discovered the extent of her financial crimes and multiple affairs. But I wasn't satisfied with their suffering. I wanted their complete destruction. The beauty of systematic revenge, I explained to my team during our final planning meeting, is that you don't just destroy someone's current situation, you destroy their ability to recover. Jeff looked up from his laptop where he was reviewing our progress. Caroline's unemployable in the marketing industry. Word is spread about the embezzlement charges. No reputable firm will hire her. And David's reputation in construction is finished, Kelvin added. Everyone knows he was given a position he wasn't qualified for and destroyed a successful company through incompetence. Which brings us to the final phase, I said. Milton still has assets. The company property, his personal real estate investments, his retirement accounts. He could potentially sell everything and start over somewhere else. Clinton raised an eyebrow. And you don't want him to have that option. Milton made a choice to prioritize family politics over competence. He chose to betray someone who had given him 5 years of loyalty and exceptional performance. He chose to enable his son's affair with my wife. Now he gets to live with the complete consequences of those choices. I pulled out a folder containing the most devastating weapon in my arsenal. Documentation of every regulatory compliance violation, every corner cut, every safety standard ignored that had occurred during David's brief tenure as managing partner. David's incompetence wasn't just embarrassing, it was dangerous. He approved substandard materials, ignored safety protocols, and cut corners on structural elements. 3 different projects have violations that could result in serious regulatory penalties. Jeff whistled low. You're going to report them to the State Construction Board. I'm going to provide the State Construction Board with detailed documentation of every violation that occurred under David's management. Violations that could result in license suspension, massive fines, and personal liability for any injuries that occur as a result of substandard work. Kelvin leaned forward. That could destroy Milton personally, not just professionally. Milton made a choice to let an unqualified person manage construction projects that affect public safety. If people get hurt because of David's incompetence, Milton should be held responsible. The regulatory complaint was filed on a Friday afternoon, backed by hundreds of pages of documentation and photographic evidence. By the following Monday, Davenport Construction was facing a comprehensive investigation that would likely result in criminal charges for endangering public safety. But even that wasn't the end of my plan. I had saved the most personal revenge for last. Through Kelvin's investigation, I had discovered that Caroline and David weren't the only ones who had betrayed me. Judith Evans, Milton's assistant who had provided me with information about the affair, had her own agenda. She had been systematically stealing from the company for years, using her access to financial systems to skim money from vendor payments. More importantly, she had been selling information about the company's clients and projects to competitors, information that had been used against Davenport Construction in several major contract negotiations. Judith thought she was helping me destroy the company because of her own resentment toward Milton. What she didn't realize was that I had been documenting her crimes the entire time, waiting for the perfect moment to use them. That moment had arrived. I arranged to meet Judith at a coffee shop downtown, ostensibly to thank her for her help in exposing Caroline and David's affair. Stephen, I have to say, watching that company fall apart has been deeply satisfying, she said over her latte. Milton finally getting what he deserves for all those years of treating his employees like disposable resources. I appreciate everything you've done, Judith. Your information was crucial to understanding what really happened. I'm just glad someone finally exposed Caroline for what she really is. That woman destroyed your marriage and manipulated everyone around her for her own benefit. I nodded sympathetically. It's unfortunate when people abuse positions of trust for personal gain. Judith missed the double meaning entirely. Exactly. People who steal and lie and manipulate others should face consequences for their actions. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder. I completely agree, which is why I think you should see this. I slid the folder across the table. Judith opened it and went pale as she saw documented evidence of her own crimes. Bank records showing the skimmed payments, emails proving she had sold confidential information to competitors, surveillance photos of her meeting with rival firms. Stephen, I can explain. There's nothing to explain, Judith. You're a thief and a traitor, just like Caroline and David. The only difference is that you thought you were on the winning side. You can't turn this over to authorities. I helped you. You helped yourself. You wanted revenge against Milton for your own reasons, and you used me to get it. But I don't work with criminals, Judith. I destroy them. Caroline's face had hardened into an expression of pure hatred. He destroyed my career, my reputation, my entire life. All because he couldn't handle losing me to someone better. So what's your proposal, Dad? David asked. Milton took a deep breath. I think we should confront him. All of us, together. Make him understand that we know what he's done and that we're not going to let him continue destroying our lives. Where is he? Caroline asked. I think I can arrange a meeting, Milton said. Tomorrow night. Just the 4 of us. I smiled in the darkness. They were planning their own confrontation, believing they could somehow intimidate me into stopping my campaign of revenge. They thought that by working together, they could regain some control over their situation. They had no idea that they were walking into the final trap I had prepared for them. As they filed out of the empty office, making plans for their confrontation with the man who had destroyed their lives. I remained hidden in the shadows, savoring the anticipation of what was to come. Tomorrow night, David and Caroline would finally understand the true scope of what I had taken from them. And more importantly, they would understand that there was no escape from the consequences of betraying someone who never forgave and never forgot. The game was almost over, and I was about to win in ways they couldn't possibly imagine. The abandoned warehouse I had chosen for our final confrontation sat on the outskirts of the industrial district, far from witnesses or interference. It was the perfect location for what I had planned, isolated, soundproof, and equipped with the tools I would need to deliver the final lesson to my betrayers. I arrived 2 hours early to prepare. The main floor of the warehouse was empty except for a single table in the center, illuminated by harsh overhead lights. In the shadows around the perimeter, I had position cameras to record everything that was about to happen. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about creating a permanent record of justice being served. At exactly 8 o'clock, Milton's car pulled into the warehouse parking lot. Through the security cameras I had installed, I watched as he, David, and Caroline approached the building with a nervous determination of people who thought they were finally taking control of their situation. They had no idea they were walking into their own funeral. I waited in the shadows as they entered the warehouse, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. The single table in the center of the room held 3 chairs and a manila envelope. "Stephen," Milton called out. "We're here. Let's get this over with." I stepped into the light, wearing a calm smile that I knew would unnerve them more than any display of anger. "Thank you all for coming. Please sit down." They remained standing, clustered together like animals sensing a predator. I said, "Sit down." My voice carried an edge that made all 3 of them flinch. "Or you can leave now and spend the rest of your lives looking over your shoulders, wondering when I'll finish what I started." They sat. I opened the manila envelope and spread its contents across the table. Photographs, financial records, legal documents, and evidence of crimes they didn't even know I knew about. "Let's start with you, Caroline. You think I destroyed your life because I couldn't handle losing you to someone better?" Caroline lifted her chin defiantly. "You're pathetic, Stephen. You couldn't accept that I found someone who actually appreciated me. Someone who appreciated you." I laughed. "You mean David, who you cheated on with your boss? Or your boss, who you cheated on with Carlos Stanley? Or Carlos Stanley, who you cheated on with at least 2 other men I haven't even identified yet?" Caroline's defiance cracked slightly. "Those were just what? Just ways to hedge your bets while you figured out which man could provide the most comfortable lifestyle." I slid a photograph across the table. "This is you with Marcus Rivera, the architect on the Hartman project. You were sleeping with him to get insider information about construction projects, which you then sold to competitors through intermediaries." The color drained from Caroline's face. That's industrial espionage, Caroline. A federal crime. You weren't just a cheating wife. You were a criminal who used your body to steal business secrets." I turned to David. "And you think I destroyed Davenport Construction because I was jealous of your partnership? You couldn't stand that Dad chose family over some outsider," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I destroyed Davenport Construction because you were dangerously incompetent and your father enabled it. But more than that, I destroyed it because you used company money to finance your affair with my wife." I slid financial records across the table. $50,000 in company funds diverted to pay for jewelry, vacations, and gifts for Caroline. That's embezzlement, David. Corporate theft to fund your adultery. Dad knew about the expenses. Dad covered up the expenses to avoid scandal, which makes him an accessory to your crimes. I turned to Milton, who had gone completely pale. "And you think I'm punishing you because you chose David over me for the partnership? I chose my son. You chose corruption over competence. You chose family politics over public safety. You chose to enable criminal behavior rather than face the truth about what your children had become." I pulled out the final set of documents. "These are death certificates, Milton. 3 people died in construction accidents over the past 2 years. Accidents that occurred because you and David cut corners on safety equipment to increase profit margins. Milton stared at the documents in horror. Those accidents were investigated. Those accidents were covered up by falsified safety reports and bribes to inspectors. I found the bank records, Milton. I found the payments to city officials. I found the forged documents. The warehouse fell silent except for the sound of 3 people realizing they were facing life in prison. You want to know what I've really been doing for the past 6 months? I continued. I haven't just been destroying your careers and reputations. I've been documenting every crime you committed, every law you broke, every person you hurt in pursuit of your selfish desires. I gestured to the cameras positioned around the warehouse. This entire conversation is being recorded and will be delivered to federal prosecutors tomorrow morning, along with complete documentation of your industrial espionage, embezzlement, bribery, and negligent homicide. Caroline stood up suddenly. You can't do this. We'll deny everything. With what credibility? You're a convicted embezzler. David is a failed executive whose incompetence destroyed a successful company. Milton is facing bankruptcy and criminal charges. Who's going to believe your word against documented evidence? David was shaking now. Stephen, please. We made mistakes, but you made choices. Calculated, selfish choices that resulted in people dying, lives being destroyed, and trust being betrayed. Now you get to live with the complete consequences of those choices. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen. I have federal agents waiting for my call. When I dial this number, they'll be here in 15 minutes to arrest all 3 of you on charges that will put you in prison for the rest of your lives. What do you want? Milton asked desperately. There has to be something. I want you to understand what you took from me. 5 years of my life. 5 years of loyalty, dedication, and trust. 5 years building something I believed in. Only to discover that the people I was building it for saw me as nothing more than a useful tool to be discarded when I was no longer needed. I stood up and walked to where they sat huddled together like frightened children. You want to know what I want? I want you to spend every remaining day of your lives remembering this moment. Remembering that you had everything, success, wealth, family, respect, and you threw it all away for petty, selfish desires. Stephen, please, Caroline started. I want you to understand that the man you betrayed was more dangerous than you ever imagined. That the loyalty you casually discarded was the only thing protecting you from someone who never forgives and never forgets. I walked toward the warehouse exit, then turned back for one final look at the 3 people who had destroyed my faith in human decency. Most importantly, I want you to know that justice isn't always swift, but it's always thorough. And today, justice has been served. I dialed the number on my phone as I walked out of the warehouse, leaving behind 3 people who finally understood the true cost of betraying someone who had given them everything. Behind me, I could hear Caroline screaming, David pleading, and Milton crying as they realized that their nightmare was just beginning. But for me, walking out into the cool night air with the satisfaction of complete victory, the nightmare was finally over. 1 year later, I stood in the corner office of O'Neill and Associates, the consulting firm I had built from the ground up using the knowledge and contacts I had gained during my time at Davenport Construction. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the city where I had once believed in loyalty and hard work as the keys to success. I had learned that success required something else entirely, the willingness to destroy anyone who tried to take what you had earned. The firm had grown rapidly, built on a reputation for ruthless efficiency and an absolute commitment to client success. Companies hired us not just for our expertise, but for our guarantee that we would eliminate any obstacle to their objectives, regardless of how personal or professional those obstacles might be. Jeff Kern managed our strategic consulting division. Clinton Horton led our legal services department. Kelvin Moran ran our corporate intelligence operation. Together, we had created the most feared and respected consulting firm in the region. My personal assistant knocked on my office door. Mr. O'Neill, you have a visitor. I'm not expecting anyone. She says it's personal. A woman named Jasmine Bowman. I looked up from my computer. I knew that name. Jasmine had been one of Caroline's friends from college, someone I hadn't seen since the early days of my marriage. Send her in. Jasmine entered my office looking nervous but determined. She was still attractive, though stress lines around her eyes suggested she'd had a difficult year. "Stephen, thank you for seeing me. I know this is awkward, given everything that's happened. What can I do for you, Jasmine?" She sat down across from my desk, gathering her courage. "I need to tell you something about Caroline. Something I should have told you years ago." I leaned back in my chair, curious despite myself. "I'm listening." "The affair with David, it wasn't her first. She cheated on you throughout your entire marriage, Stephen. I knew about it, and I said nothing because I thought it wasn't my place to interfere. I know about the affairs, Jasmine. All of them." She looked surprised. "You know? But then why didn't you? Why didn't I leave her sooner?" "Because I believed in loyalty. I believed in working to fix problems rather than running from them. I believed that dedication and commitment could overcome any obstacle. And now," I gestured around my office, at the awards on the walls, the expensive furniture, the view of a city where I had become a man people feared and respected. "Now I believe in consequences. Caroline made her choices, and she lived with the results. As did everyone else who betrayed me." Jasmine was quiet for a moment. "I heard about what happened to them. Caroline's in federal prison. David's serving time for the safety violations. Milton died of a heart attack while awaiting trial. People make choices. Sometimes those choices have consequences they don't anticipate. Stephen, I came here because I wanted to apologize. I should have told you the truth about Caroline from the beginning. I let you waste years of your life on someone who didn't deserve your loyalty." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. But all I saw was genuine regret and something else, an attraction that had probably been there for years but was only now being acknowledged. "Apology accepted, Jasmine. Is there anything else?" She hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. "I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner sometime. I know the timing might seem strange, but you want to see if I'm interested in someone who actually values loyalty and honesty?" Her face flushed slightly. "Something like that." I considered the offer. Jasmine was attractive, intelligent, and apparently possessed enough integrity to feel guilty about not warning me about Caroline's betrayals. She was also divorced herself, which meant she understood the pain of betrayal. But more importantly, she was offering me something I hadn't had in a long time, a chance to build something positive instead of destroying something negative. "I'd like that," I said, "but I need you to understand something about who I've become." "What's that?" "I don't forgive betrayal. I don't give second chances to people who lie to me or manipulate me. If you start something with me, you either commit to it completely or you walk away before anyone gets hurt." "I understand." "Do you?" "Because the man you knew when I was married to Caroline doesn't exist anymore. I've become someone who deals with problems definitively and permanently. Someone who never forgets and never forgives." Jasmine met my eyes steadily. "Maybe that's exactly the kind of man I need." That evening, as I sat across from Jasmine in an expensive restaurant downtown, I realized that my campaign of revenge had given me more than just satisfaction. It had taught me who I really was underneath the facade of loyalty and dedication I had maintained for so many years. I was someone who could build or destroy with equal skill. Someone who could inspire loyalty or fear depending on how I was treated. Someone who had learned that strength came not from forgiveness, but from the absolute certainty that betrayal would be met with consequences that made the betrayer wish they had never been born. "So what happens now?" Jasmine asked over dinner. "Do you just keep building your business empire?" "I keep building, yes, but I also keep watching. There are a lot of people in this city who think they can take shortcuts, who think they can betray trust without consequences, who think they can destroy other people's lives for their own benefit. And you make sure they learn otherwise?" I smiled. Not the cold smile I had perfected during my months of revenge, but something warmer and more genuine. I make sure that people who value loyalty and honesty are protected, and people who prey on others pay the price for their choices. Jasmine raised her wine glass. "To consequences." I touched my glass to hers. "To justice." As we toasted, I looked around the restaurant at the other diners, successful people who had built their lives through various combinations of talent, effort, and ruthlessness. Some of them had probably betrayed others to get where they were. Some had probably been betrayed themselves. The difference was that I had learned the most important lesson of all. In a world where betrayal was common, the man who never forgave and never forgot held all the power. And I intended to use that power to build something lasting. Not just for myself, but for everyone who understood that loyalty should be rewarded and betrayal should be punished without mercy. The game was over. I had won completely. And now, finally, I could begin to enjoy the spoils of victory. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Vincent Torres had built his life like a fortress, methodical, impenetrable, and designed to protect what mattered most. At 38, he owned 3 successful auto repair shops across Denver, each one a testament to his transformation from a troubled youth who'd learned survival on the streets to a man who commanded respect through sheer force of will. His hands, now calloused from honest work, had once known different kinds of violence. Growing up in foster care after his parents died in a house fire when he was 12, Vincent had learned early that the world showed no mercy to the weak. By 16, he was running with a crew that specialized in making problems disappear permanently. But a close call with a murder charge at 19 had straightened him out. He'd channeled his ruthless instincts into building something legitimate, though the old Vincent never truly died. He simply wore a business suit now. The night he met Rebecca Hoffman at a charity gala 5 years ago, he thought he'd found his missing piece. She was radiant in a way that seemed genuine, a pediatric nurse with kind eyes and a laugh that could light up a room. Her blonde hair caught the ballroom lights as she spoke passionately about helping children, and Vincent found himself captivated by her apparent innocence. What he didn't know was that Rebecca's sweetness was as carefully constructed as his own respectable facade. Behind her angelic smile lay a woman who'd grown up in a household where her mother, Patricia Hoffman, had taught her that men were resources to be exploited, not partners to be loved. Patricia, a former beauty queen turned bitter divorcee, had raised Rebecca with one clear message: secure the wealthiest man possible, then take everything when the time was right. Rebecca's father, Dr. Raymond Hoffman, was a plastic surgeon who'd lost his medical license due to a malpractice suit involving a patient's death, a detail Rebecca had carefully hidden from Vincent. Raymond now worked as a consultant for medical malpractice lawyers, harboring deep resentment against successful men like Vincent who reminded him of what he'd lost. The Hoffmans had immediately seen Vincent as their golden ticket. His businesses were thriving, his reputation was solid, and most importantly, he seemed genuinely devoted to Rebecca. After a whirlwind courtship, they married in what Vincent thought was the happiest day of his life. Their daughter, Emma, arrived 3 years later, a beautiful child with Rebecca's blonde curls and Vincent's determined chin. Vincent adored her completely, never suspecting that Rebecca saw the child primarily as insurance, another chain to bind Vincent to their marriage and ensure maximum financial gain when their plan reached fruition. But Rebecca underestimated one crucial detail about her husband. Vincent's love came with an unspoken contract: absolute loyalty in exchange for absolute protection. He would die for those he loved, but betrayal was an unforgivable sin that awakened the dangerous man he'd worked so hard to bury. The Hoffmans' plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would slowly position Vincent as an unfit father and unstable husband, building a case for Rebecca to gain full custody of Emma and claim the majority of his assets in a divorce. Patricia had connections in family court through her book club, which included Judge Helen Morrison's wife. Raymond's legal contacts provided insight into how to document Vincent's supposed mental decline. They began their campaign subtly. Rebecca started attending therapy sessions, creating a paper trail of Vincent's alleged verbal abuse and erratic behavior. All carefully fictional, but professionally documented. She recorded conversations out of context, photographed minor damages to the house that she claimed came from Vincent's rages, and slowly poisoned Emma's relationship with her father by telling the child that Daddy was sick and might hurt them. Vincent noticed Rebecca becoming distant, but attributed it to work stress. He had no idea that his wife was methodically destroying their life together, planning to take everything he'd built and leave him with nothing. The perfect opportunity came when Vincent mentioned he was driving to Colorado Springs to look at a potential fourth shop location. Rebecca saw her chance to accelerate their timeline. Chapter 2. The Setup. The morning of March 15th started like any other. Vincent kissed Rebecca goodbye, hugged Emma close, and promised to bring her a surprise from his trip. He had no way of knowing that Rebecca had spent the previous evening making very different preparations. At 8 a.m., Rebecca called her father. He just left for Colorado Springs. It's time. Raymond's medical knowledge proved crucial for their plan. He provided Rebecca with a small vial of ketamine, enough to incapacitate someone without killing them, but sufficient to cause a serious accident. Rebecca had been slipping tiny doses into Vincent's coffee for weeks, making him occasionally drowsy and forgetful, laying groundwork for their narrative of his mental instability. But today's dose would be different. Rebecca had calculated exactly how much would be needed to cause Vincent to lose control of his vehicle at a specific location, a winding stretch of highway known for accidents, where a crash would seem completely natural. She'd followed Vincent in her own car, staying far enough back to avoid detection. When she saw him pulling over at a rest stop, feeling the effects of the drug, she knew the moment had arrived. Using a burner phone, she called 911. "I think I just saw a man force another car off the road near mile marker 47, she reported, disguising her voice. "The car that got hit rolled down the embankment. You need to send help immediately." The call would establish her as a concerned witness while providing an alibi for being in the area. She'd already ditched the ketamine vial in a dumpster miles away. Vincent's truck rolled 3 times before slamming into a cluster of pine trees. The impact was devastating. Broken ribs, a punctured lung, severe head trauma. When the paramedics found him, he was unconscious and barely breathing. Rebecca arrived at the hospital within hours, playing the role of the devastated wife to perfection. She wept in the waiting room, accepted comfort from nurses, and made all the right sounds about hoping and praying for her husband's recovery. But privately, she was calculating. The doctor said Vincent might never wake up, and if he did, there could be permanent brain damage. Either scenario worked perfectly for their plan. A vegetative Vincent would be even easier to control than a dead one, and would ensure continued access to his business assets through power of attorney. Patricia and Raymond arrived that evening, both wearing masks of concern that fooled everyone except their daughter, who recognized the cold satisfaction in their eyes. They'd done it. Vincent Torres, the man who'd never shown weakness to anyone, lay helpless in an ICU bed while they prepared to dismantle everything he'd built. Dr. Sarah Martinez, Vincent's attending physician, was cautiously optimistic about his chances, but warned that brain injuries were unpredictable. "The next 48 hours are critical," she explained to Rebecca. "If he wakes up, we'll know more about potential cognitive damage." Rebecca nodded tearfully, playing her part even as she silently hoped Vincent would remain unconscious long enough for them to complete their legal maneuvering. Patricia had already contacted their family court friend about expediting custody proceedings based on Vincent's condition, while Raymond was researching how to gain medical power of attorney for an incapacitated spouse. They had no idea that Vincent's street-hardened survival instincts were already stirring beneath the medical monitors and 4 tubes. The man who'd learned to fight for his life in foster homes and back alleys wasn't going to go down easily, even if his enemies thought they held all the cards. The Hoffmans celebrated quietly that night over dinner at Patricia's house, toasting their success with expensive wine. Emma sat in the next room, confused and scared about her father, while the adults who were supposed to protect her family planned its destruction. "Phase 2 starts tomorrow," Patricia declared, raising her glass. By the end of the month, Everything he owns will be ours, and that bastard will either be dead or wish he was. They couldn't have known that their incapacitated target was already beginning to stir, his mind sharp and his memory intact, ready to discover just how deep their betrayal ran. Chapter 3: The Awakening. Vincent's consciousness returned like water seeping through cracks in concrete, slowly, then all at once. He became aware of the steady beeping of monitors, the antiseptic smell of the hospital, and the dull ache radiating through his entire body. But he kept his breathing steady and his eyes closed, a survival instinct honed from years of dangerous situations where showing weakness meant death. Through the fog of medication, he heard familiar voices near his bed. Rebecca's voice, but stripped of the warmth he remembered. "Everything is going according to plan," she said with satisfaction that chilled him to the bone. His mother-in-law's laugh followed, sharp and predatory. "He's too clueless to notice." Vincent's blood turned to ice as the pieces fell into place. The recent distance from Rebecca, his increasing fatigue, the subtle changes in how she spoke to Emma about him. It hadn't been stress or imagination. It had been deliberate. He fought to control his breathing as fury built in his chest like molten steel. These people had tried to kill him. Not content with simply leaving, they'd attempted murder and were now standing over his hospital bed, celebrating their success. The old Vincent, the one who'd learned that mercy was a luxury the weak couldn't afford, stirred in the depths of his mind like a hibernating predator sensing prey. "The lawyers say we can have the power of attorney paperwork ready by Friday," Patricia continued. "Once that's in place, we can start liquidating his assets. The shops alone should bring in close to $2 million. And the custody hearing," Raymond's voice joined the conversation, equally cold and calculating. "Judge Morrison's wife assured me it's a formality," Rebecca replied. "With Vincent incapacitated and the documentation we've built up about his instability, I'll have full custody within a month. Emma will never have to see him again." Vincent's hands clenched almost imperceptibly beneath the hospital blanket. They weren't just stealing his money, they were stealing his daughter. The child he'd loved unconditionally, read bedtime stories to every night, taught to ride a bike in their driveway. They were planning to erase him from her life entirely. The sound of small footsteps interrupted his murderous thoughts. "Mommy," Emma's voice, uncertain and scared. "Is Daddy going to be okay?" "Shoot, sweetheart." Rebecca's tone changed instantly, becoming the nurturing mother Vincent had fallen in love with. "Daddy is very sick. But remember what we talked about? Sometimes people get so sick that they can't come home anymore." "I brought Officer Kelly like you asked," Emma said quietly. Vincent's eyes nearly snapped open. "An officer? Why would Rebecca need police here unless?" "Mrs. Torres?" A man's voice, official and professional. "I'm Officer Daniel Kelly. You said you needed to discuss some concerns about your husband's behavior prior to the accident." The final piece of their plan crystallized in Vincent's mind. They weren't just going to take everything. They were going to destroy his reputation completely, frame him as an abuser, an unfit father, maybe even suggest he'd been responsible for his own accident. "Thank you for coming, Officer Kelly," Rebecca said, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "I've been so worried about coming forward, but after what happened to Vincent, I realize I can't stay silent anymore. For Emma's safety." Vincent had heard enough. As they moved their conversation toward the hallway, supposedly to spare Emma from hearing difficult things, he began planning. Not the emotional, reactive planning of a hurt husband, but the cold, methodical planning of a man who'd once made dangerous people disappear without a trace. They thought he was unconscious, helpless, at their mercy. They had no idea that they'd just declared war on someone who had never lost a fight when everything was on the line. Over the next several hours, Vincent remained perfectly still, listening to every conversation, every phone call, every whispered plan. He learned about the drug coffee, the staged evidence of abuse, the bribery of court officials. He memorized names, timelines, and details. Dr. Martinez checked on him regularly, and during one late-night visit when she was alone, Vincent made his first careful move. "Doctor," he whispered, barely audible. She jumped, then quickly moved closer. "Mr. Torres? Can you hear me? Please," he breathed, his voice weak but urgent. "Don't tell them I'm awake. My wife, she's not who you think she is." Dr. Martinez frowned, checking his monitors. "Mr. Torres, you've suffered a serious head injury. It's common to have confusion, even paranoia." "Listen to me," Vincent interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "My wife drugged me. This wasn't an accident. If you tell her I'm conscious, she'll find a way to finish what she started." Something in his tone made the doctor pause. She'd seen enough domestic violence cases to recognize genuine fear, and despite her medical training telling her this could be brain injury-related paranoia, her instincts said otherwise. "What do you need me to do?" she asked quietly. "Keep this between us for now. Let me gather strength and evidence." "Can you do that?" Dr. Martinez looked at Vincent's charts, then back at his alert, calculating eyes. This wasn't the confused rambling of a brain-injured patient. This was the clear thinking of a man who'd uncovered something terrible. "I can give you some time," she agreed. "But if your condition deteriorates, or if I think you're in danger, I'll have to act." "Understood. And doctor? Thank you." As she left, Vincent allowed himself the first genuine emotion since waking up, a cold smile that would have terrified anyone who knew what it meant. The Hoffmans thought they were playing chess with a fool. They were about to learn they'd sat down across from a grandmaster. Chapter 4. Gathering Intelligence. Dr. Martinez proved to be an invaluable ally. Over the next 3 days, she maintained the fiction that Vincent remained unconscious while secretly monitoring his recovery. His body was healing faster than expected. The same toughness that had helped him survive foster care was serving him well now. During visiting hours, Vincent listened as his family revealed more of their plan. Rebecca had indeed been drugging him for weeks, but not just with ketamine. Raymond had provided her with a cocktail of medications designed to cause memory issues, mood swings, and disorientation, all symptoms that would support their narrative of mental instability. "The beauty of it," Raymond explained to Patricia during one of their bedside vigils, "is that even if he survives, the brain injury combined with the drug history will make him seem unreliable. No court will believe anything he says." They were thorough, Vincent had to admit. They'd thought of everything except the possibility that their target might be awake and listening. Emma visited daily, usually with Rebecca, and those moments were the hardest for Vincent. His daughter would hold his hand and whisper stories about school, about how she missed him, about how she didn't understand why everyone seemed so sad. Rebecca would watch with what looked like maternal concern, but Vincent could now see the calculation behind her eyes. "Daddy, I had a bad dream," Emma whispered during one visit when Rebecca stepped out to talk with Patricia. "I dreamed that you went away and never came back, and Mommy said it was because you didn't love me anymore." Vincent's heart shattered. They were already poisoning his daughter against him, making her doubt his love even while he lay helpless in a hospital bed. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. That night, Dr. Martinez brought him news that changed everything. "I've been doing some research," she said quietly, checking to ensure they were alone. "Your wife has been asking very specific questions about your prognosis, particularly about cognitive function and long-term disability. She's also been in contact with a lawyer who specializes in medical power of attorney cases." "What kind of questions?" Vincent asked, though he suspected he already knew. Whether you'd be able to manage your own affairs if you woke up. Whether there might be permanent memory loss or personality changes. She seemed very interested in the possibility of legal guardianship. Vincent nodded grimly. "She's planning to have me declared incompetent." "What else?" "I also ran some blood tests on samples we took when you first arrived." "Vincent, you had enough ketamine in your system to incapacitate a horse. No one takes that much accidentally." The confirmation of what he already knew still hit like a physical blow. "Can you prove it?" "The levels are documented in your medical records." "But ketamine metabolizes quickly. If someone wanted to claim it was administered at the hospital for medical reasons, it would be hard to prove otherwise after this much time." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he asked, "Doctor, I need a favor. Can you help me make some phone calls without anyone knowing?" Dr. Martinez hesitated. "What kind of calls?" "I need to contact some old friends." People who can help me investigate my wife's background and her family's. Vincent, if you're thinking about doing something illegal. Nothing illegal, he assured her, which was technically true. The illegal parts would come later. I just need information. Knowledge is power, and right now, they have all the power because they think I'm helpless. After some consideration, Dr. Martinez agreed to help, understanding that Vincent needed allies if he was going to survive whatever his family had planned. Vincent's first call was to Tony Castellano, a private investigator he'd known since his street days. Tony had gone legitimate around the same time Vincent had, but he still had connections in the darker corners of Denver's underworld. Jesus, Vincent, Tony's voice crackled through the phone Dr. Martinez had smuggled in. I heard about the accident. How you holding up? Better than my family thinks, Vincent replied carefully. Tony, I need you to look into some people for me. Deep background checks, financial records, criminal history, everything you can dig up. He gave Tony the names Rebecca, Patricia, Raymond, even the lawyer and Judge Rebecca had mentioned. I also need surveillance on them. I want to know where they go, who they meet with, what they're planning. This sounds personal, man. What's going on? They tried to kill me, Tony, and now they're going after my daughter. The line was quiet for a moment. Tony had known Vincent long enough to understand what that meant. I'll have preliminary information by tomorrow. Full workup by the end of the week. And Tony, this needs to stay quiet. As far as anyone knows, I'm still unconscious. Got it. Vincent, whatever you're planning, you know I'm in if you need backup. Vincent smiled coldly. I might take you up on that. His second call was to Miguel Santos, who owned a successful security company, but had once been Vincent's partner in their teenage crew. Miguel specialized in electronic surveillance and had connections with people who could make life very difficult for Vincent's enemies. Miguel, I need eyes and ears on some people. Can you set up surveillance without them knowing? For you? Consider it done. What's the situation? Vincent explained, and Miguel's response was immediate and violent. Those fuckers try to kill you? Vincent, just say the word and they disappear. Not yet, Vincent cautioned, but I may need that option later. For now, I just need information and evidence. You got it. I'll have cameras and bugs in place within 24 hours. His final call was to Detective Lisa Crawford, one of the few honest cops he'd maintained a relationship with over the years. Lisa had been instrumental in Vincent's transition to legitimate business, and she owed him several favors. Lisa, I need to ask you about something confidentially. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to frame an unconscious person for domestic abuse, how would they do it? Vincent, what the hell is going on? Are you in trouble? He explained the situation, and Lisa's cop instincts immediately engaged. They're building a paper trail, she confirmed. Therapy records, police reports, witness statements. If it's done right, it's almost impossible to fight, especially if the accused can't defend themselves. What would you need to prove it was fabricated? Contradictory evidence. Proof the witnesses were lying or coerced. Financial connections between the accusers. Or, she paused, where you could catch them in the act of fabricating evidence. Interesting, Vincent mused. Lisa, I may need your help soon. Officially, just promise me you won't do anything stupid. Vincent almost laughed. Everything he was planning was stupid, dangerous, and probably illegal. But his enemies had made one fatal mistake. They'd left him alive. As Dr. Martinez helped him end the calls and hide the phone, Vincent felt the familiar calm that had always preceded his most dangerous moments. The old Vincent was fully awake now, and the Hoffmans were about to learn why mercy was a luxury he'd never been able to afford. Chapter 5, The Web Titans. Tony's preliminary report arrived faster than expected, delivered by Dr. Martinez, who'd agreed to serve as Vincent's covert communication channel. What he read made his blood run cold, not from fear, but from pure, crystalline rage. The Hoffmans had done this before. Rebecca's first husband, Michael Brennan, had died in a suspicious car accident 4 years before she met Vincent. The police report showed brake failure on a mountain road, but Tony had uncovered something the original investigation missed. Rebecca had taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Michael just 6 months before his death. More damning was what happened after. Rebecca had inherited Michael's successful landscaping business, which Patricia and Raymond had systematically dismantled and sold within a year. The money had funded their comfortable lifestyle and Raymond's legal troubles. "There's more," Dr. Martinez said quietly, reading Tony's notes. "Your wife was married to someone else before Michael. Thomas Reed, a contractor in Wyoming. He disappeared during a camping trip 3 years into their marriage. Body was never found, but Rebecca inherited everything through a will that was suspiciously convenient." Vincent stared at the ceiling, processing the information. His wife wasn't just unfaithful, she was a serial killer. And Emma, his precious daughter, was living with these monsters. The surveillance Miguel had installed was already paying dividends. Audio recordings from the Hoffman house revealed their ongoing plans with chilling clarity. "Vincent's recovery is taking too long." Patricia's voice came through the hidden microphone in her living room. "We need to accelerate the timeline. The doctors are saying he might wake up soon," Rebecca replied, her voice tense. "If he does, everything falls apart." "Not necessarily," Raymond interjected. "I still have some medical connections. If Vincent has a relapse, another brain bleed maybe, it would be unfortunate but not unexpected." Vincent's hands clenched as he listened to them plan his murder with the casual tone of people discussing dinner plans. "What about Emma?" Rebecca asked. "She's been asking too many questions about when Daddy is coming home." "We'll handle Emma," Patricia said coldly. "Children are resilient. She'll forget about him eventually." That night, Emma visited with Rebecca, as usual, but this time Vincent was ready. Dr. Martinez had equipped him with a tiny recording device that could capture conversations even when he appeared unconscious. "Mommy," Emma said quietly, holding Vincent's hand. "Mrs. Rodriguez at school says that when people get hurt in car accidents, sometimes it's not really an accident. She says sometimes bad people hurt good people on purpose." Vincent felt his daughter's small fingers tighten around his, and his heart broke at the fear in her voice. "Oh, sweetheart," Rebecca replied, her tone carefully controlled. "Mrs. Rodriguez shouldn't fill your head with scary stories. Daddy's accident was just that, an accident. Sometimes these things just happen." "But I heard Grandma Pat and Grandpa Ray talking," Emma continued, her 6-year-old honesty cutting through Rebecca's lies. "They said something about making Daddy go away forever." "What do they mean?" The silence that followed was electric. Vincent could feel Rebecca's tension through the air. "Emma, you must have misunderstood," Rebecca said finally. "Grandma and Grandpa love Daddy very much. They're just worried about him, like we all are." "I want to talk to Daddy," Emma insisted. "Even if he's sleeping, I want to tell him I love him." "Of course, baby. Tell him whatever you want." Emma leaned close to Vincent's ear, her warm breath tickling his skin. "Daddy, I know you can hear me. Mommy thinks I don't understand, but I do. I'm scared, Daddy. I don't want them to make you go away. Please wake up soon." It took every ounce of Vincent's self-control not to open his eyes and gather his daughter into his arms. Instead, he squeezed her hand just slightly, enough for her to feel, but subtle enough that Rebecca wouldn't notice. Emma gasped softly. "Mommy, I think Daddy squeezed my hand." "That's just your imagination, sweetheart," Rebecca said quickly. "Come on, visiting hours are almost over." As they left, Vincent heard Emma whisper, "I felt it, Daddy. I know you're in there." The next morning brought devastating news from Detective Crawford. She'd done some discreet investigating into Officer Kelly, the cop Rebecca had brought to create a police report. "Vincent, this guy is dirty," Lisa reported during a carefully arranged phone call. "He's been taking money from divorce lawyers for years, creating bogus domestic violence reports for custody cases. I can't prove it officially without blowing your cover, but I've got enough to know he's compromised." "What about the judge?" Vincent asked. "Judge Morrison is clean, but her wife runs a book club that's basically a high society gossip ring. Patricia Hoffman has been feeding them stories about your supposed abuse for months, poisoning the well before any official proceedings begin." Vincent absorbed this information, adding it to his growing understanding of how thoroughly the Hoffmans had planned his destruction. They'd left nothing to chance, corrupting every system that might protect him. But they'd made one crucial error. They assumed that Vincent Torres, successful businessman and devoted father, was all there was to know about him. They had no idea about the dangerous man he'd been before, or the lethal skills he could still access when everything he loved was threatened. That evening, Miguel called with an update that changed everything. "Vincent, you need to hear this." Miguel's voice was tight with urgency. "We caught them planning your murder. It's happening tomorrow night." The recording was crystal clear. Raymond explaining how he could access the hospital's drug storage, Patricia providing alibis, and Rebecca agreeing to be present when Vincent took a turn for the worse. "They're planning to inject you with potassium chloride," Miguel continued. "It'll stop your heart, and with your existing injuries, it'll look like natural complications." Vincent closed his eyes, feeling the familiar cold calm settle over him. The time for gathering intelligence was over. Tomorrow night, the Hoffmans would come to finish what they'd started. They had no idea that their intended victim would be ready for them. "Miguel," Vincent said quietly, "remember what you offered about making people disappear? Of course. I may need that option. But first, I want them to suffer. All of them. What do you need?" Vincent smiled, and it was the cold, predatory expression that had once made dangerous men fear him. "I need to die tomorrow night, and then I need to come back from the dead." Chapter 6. The Resurrection. Dr. Martinez's hands shook as she prepared the cocktail of drugs Vincent had requested. "This is insane," she whispered. "If we miscalculate even slightly, you could actually die." "Trust me," Vincent replied, his voice calm despite the magnitude of what they were planning. "I've survived worse odds than this." The plan was elegantly simple. When the Hoffmans came to murder him tomorrow night, Vincent would already appear to be dead. A careful combination of medications would slow his heart rate and breathing to virtually undetectable levels, while maintaining enough brain function for him to remain conscious and aware. To anyone without sophisticated monitoring equipment, he would appear to have flatlined. Miguel had positioned his surveillance team throughout the hospital, ready to record everything. Tony had backup plans in place to protect Emma once the operation began. And Detective Crawford was standing by with warrants she couldn't officially execute until they had concrete evidence of attempted murder. "The timing has to be perfect," Dr. Martinez explained, checking Vincent's charts one final time. "I can keep you under for maybe 2 hours maximum. Any longer, and there could be permanent damage." 2 hours is all I need," Vincent assured her. "Once they think I'm dead, they'll reveal everything. Guilt makes people confess, and arrogance makes them brag." The drugs began taking effect as the sun set outside Vincent's window. His heart rate slowed, his breathing became shallow, and the monitors began showing the flatline pattern that would convince his family he'd finally succumbed to his injuries. At 9:47 p.m., the alarms began sounding. Rebecca arrived within minutes, having been coincidentally in the hospital cafeteria when Vincent took his turn for the worse. Her performance was Oscar-worthy. Tears, desperate pleas for the doctors to save him, the perfect image of a devastated wife. But Vincent, floating in a state of conscious near-death, heard the satisfaction beneath her sobs. Raymond arrived next, playing the grieving father-in-law, while secretly checking to ensure Vincent was truly gone. His medical training made him more thorough than the others, but even he was convinced by the carefully orchestrated scene. Patricia came last, bringing Emma despite the late hour. "I wanted to say goodbye," she explained to Dr. Martinez, who played her part perfectly, looking appropriately sympathetic while the hidden cameras recorded everything. "Daddy." Emma's voice was small and broken as she approached the bed. "Daddy, please don't be dead. I need you to come back." Through his medicated haze, Vincent felt his daughter's tears falling on his hand. The urge to comfort her was overwhelming, but he forced himself to remain still. This was for her, to protect her from the monsters who'd been masquerading as family. "He's gone, sweetheart," Rebecca said, her voice carefully modulated between grief and relief. "Daddy was very sick, and now he's at peace." "But I felt him squeeze my hand yesterday," Emma protested. "He was trying to tell me something." "That was just your imagination," Patricia said firmly. "Sometimes when we love someone very much, we imagine things that aren't real." As the family gathered around his corpse, Vincent listened to their true feelings emerge. "What happens now?" Rebecca asked quietly, thinking Emma couldn't hear. Now we wait for the life insurance to pay out, Patricia replied. $2 million plus the businesses. You'll be set for life. And Emma will adjust. Children are resilient. But Emma wasn't adjusting. Vincent could hear her quiet sobs, could feel her small hand holding his with desperate hope. His daughter knew, with the intuition that children possess, that something was wrong with this picture. "Mommy," Emma whispered, "why don't you seem sad? When Grandpa Torres died, you cried for days. But now you just seem different." The silence that followed was telling. Rebecca struggled for an answer that would satisfy a 6-year-old's logic without revealing too much. "I'm sad inside, baby," she finally said. "Sometimes grown-ups show sadness differently. But Grandma Pat is smiling," Emma observed with devastating honesty. "And Grandpa Ray keeps looking at his watch like he wants to leave." Vincent almost smiled despite everything. His daughter was sharp, sharper than the Hoffmans had given her credit for. She was seeing through their performance, even when the hospital staff believed it completely. As the night wore on, the family's guard began to drop. They spoke more freely, believing Vincent was truly gone and Emma was too young to understand the significance of what she was hearing. "The lawyer will handle the estate proceedings," Raymond told Rebecca. "With the power of attorney paperwork we prepared, it should be straightforward." "What about the police investigation into the accident?" Rebecca asked. "Officer Kelly has already filed his report," Patricia assured her. Vincent was clearly unstable, probably suicidal. "The accident will be ruled as such, which actually works better for the insurance claim than if it appeared to be our fault." Vincent's blood would have boiled if he weren't already chemically suppressed. They'd thought of everything, planned for every contingency. Except one. At exactly 11:30 p.m., Dr. Martinez made her announcement. "I'm sorry, but I need to ask the family to step out while we prepare Mr. Torres for the morgue. It's hospital protocol." As they filed out, Emma pulled away from Rebecca's hand and ran back to Vincent's bedside. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered, pressing her face close to his ear. "And I know you love me too. I don't care what they say. You're not really gone. You're going to come back and save me, aren't you?" She kissed his forehead gently, and in that moment, Vincent knew that everything he was about to do would be worth it. His daughter believed in him, even when the rest of the world thought he was dead. As soon as the family was out of earshot, Dr. Martinez began administering the reversal drugs. Vincent's heart rate slowly climbed back to normal levels, his breathing deepened, and his consciousness fully returned. "How do you feel?" she asked anxiously. "Like I've been dead," Vincent replied hoarsely, "but very much alive. Do we get everything?" Miguel's voice came through the hidden communication device. "Every word, every expression, every tell. We got them cold, Vincent. Murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud, child endangerment. Enough to put them away for decades." "Good," Vincent said, sitting up slowly as feeling returned to his extremities. "But prison is too easy. They try to destroy my family, poison my daughter against me, and steal everything I've built. They wanted to erase Vincent Torres from existence." He looked at Dr. Martinez with eyes that now held no trace of the injured, helpless patient she'd been treating. "It's time to show them what Vincent Torres looks like when he stops playing dead. The old Vincent, the one who'd learned that sometimes the only justice available was the kind you made yourself, was fully awake now. And the Hoffmans were about to discover that some people were far more dangerous after you try to kill them. Chapter 7. Rising from the Dead. Vincent's death unleashed a flurry of activity from the Hoffmans that Miguel's surveillance network captured in devastating detail. Within hours of leaving the hospital, they were already dividing his assets like vultures over a corpse. From his hidden position in Dr. Martinez's office, Vincent watched the feeds with Tony and Miguel. The three men had reunited for the first time in 20 years, brought together by the kind of betrayal that demanded the old rules. "Look at this shit," Tony muttered, watching Patricia and Raymond celebrate with expensive champagne in their living room. "They're not even pretending to mourn." On another screen, Rebecca was already meeting with the estate lawyer, presenting forged power of attorney documents and a will that had mysteriously appeared after Vincent's death, a will that left everything to her and specifically excluded his brothers from his former crew. the only people who might have contested it. But the most damning footage came from Emma's bedroom, where Rebecca thought she was having a private conversation with her daughter. "Mommy, when is Daddy's funeral?" Emma asked, clutching the teddy bear Vincent had given her for her last birthday. "Soon, sweetheart. But you need to understand something important. Daddy wasn't the man we thought he was. He was sick in his mind, and sometimes he did bad things." "That's not true," Emma protested. "Daddy never did bad things. He was nice to me." Rebecca's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing cold frustration. "Emma, you're too young to understand. Adults know things that children don't. Daddy was dangerous, and it's better that he's gone." Vincent's hands clenched as he watched his wife systematically poison his daughter's memories of him. But Emma, bless her brave little heart, wasn't buying it. "You're lying," Emma said with the devastating honesty of childhood. "And I don't think Daddy is really dead. I think he's coming back." Rebecca's face went white. "What do you mean?" "Of course he's dead. You saw him in the hospital." "Dead people don't squeeze hands," Emma replied simply. "And dead people don't have dreams. I dreamed about Daddy last night, and he told me to be brave because he was going to fix everything." The silence that followed was electric. Rebecca stared at her daughter with something approaching fear, as if the child's intuition might somehow resurrect Vincent through sheer will. "Dreams aren't real, Emma," Rebecca said finally. "Daddy is gone, and you need to accept that." "No," Emma said with quiet defiance. "Daddy always keeps his promises, and he promised to protect me." Watching his daughter's courage gave Vincent the final piece of resolve he needed. Emma believed he would come back for her, and he wouldn't let her down. "Phase 1 starts tonight," Vincent told his assembled team. "Miguel, I need you to arrange a very special delivery to the Hoffman house. Tony, you're going to help me pay a visit to Officer Kelly. And Dr. Martinez, you're going to have a very interesting conversation with the insurance investigators." The plan Vincent had crafted was surgical in its precision and devastating in its scope. He wouldn't just expose the Hoffmans. He would systematically destroy every aspect of their lives while making them understand exactly what they'd awakened. At 2 a.m., Officer Kelly was leaving a bar where he'd been celebrating his latest payoff when he found Vincent Torres waiting by his patrol car. The corrupt cop's face went white as he stared at a dead man. "Impossible," Kelly stammered, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. "I wouldn't," Vincent said calmly, and something in his tone froze Kelly's hand. "You're going to listen very carefully to what I have to say." Vincent had learned long ago that the most effective intimidation came not from threats, but from absolute certainty of consequences. He spoke quietly, matter-of-factly, explaining exactly what would happen to Kelly's career, his pension, his family's safety, and his physical well-being if he didn't immediately correct every false report he'd filed about Vincent. "But they said you were dead," Kelly whispered. "Do I look dead to you?" Vincent asked, stepping closer. "I know about the Hoffman payoffs, Daniel. I know about every dirty report you've filed for the last 5 years. Tomorrow morning, you're going to call Detective Crawford and confess everything, or I'm going to make sure your wife learns about your gambling debts and your girlfriend in Aurora." Kelly's face crumpled. The confident corruption evaporated, leaving just a scared man who'd made terrible choices. "What do you want me to do?" "Exactly what I tell you. And if you even think about warning the Hoffmans." Vincent's smile was arctic. "Let's just say I know people who make problems disappear permanently." While Vincent was handling Kelly, Miguel was implementing his own part of the plan. This special delivery to the Hoffman house was a gift basket with an unusual addition: high-end surveillance equipment disguised as innocent household items. A picture frame with a hidden camera, a clock with audio recording capability, and a decorative plant pot that could monitor all electronic communications in the house. But more importantly, the gift basket came with a card from your loving son-in-law. "I'll be seeing you soon. Vincent." Patricia found the basket on their doorstep the next morning and immediately called Rebecca in panic. "This isn't possible." Rebecca's voice shook through the recorded phone call. "He's dead. We saw him die." "Then explain the card." Patricia shrieked. "Explain how a dead man sent us a gift basket. It has to be some kind of mistake. Maybe the delivery company mixed up the orders." But doubt was creeping into their voices, and doubt was the first step toward the complete psychological destruction Vincent had planned. Dr. Martinez, meanwhile, was having her conversation with the insurance investigators, a conversation that revealed the ketamine found in Vincent's system, the suspicious timing of the accident, and the unusual behavior of his family after his supposed death. "I'm not saying it was murder," she told the investigators with carefully practiced reluctance. "But as a medical professional, I've never seen a family react to a death quite like this. Usually, there's more grief and less financial planning." By noon, the Hoffmans' perfect plan was beginning to unravel. The insurance company had frozen the life insurance payout pending investigation. Officer Kelly had confessed to Detective Crawford, who was now armed with search warrants. And somewhere in Denver, a man they thought they'd killed was methodically destroying everything they'd built. But Vincent was just getting started. He'd spent years learning that the most devastating attacks came not from without, but from within. The Hoffmans had counted on his death to cover their crimes. They were about to learn that resurrection came with a price, and Vincent Torres collected his debts in full. Chapter 8: The Reckoning. The psychological warfare began at exactly 3:17 a.m. when every electronic device in the Hoffman house simultaneously activated. Televisions turned on by themselves, radios began playing static, and Patricia's phone started calling random numbers from her contact list. Miguel's handiwork was subtle but terrifying, the kind of technological haunting that made people question their own sanity. But the real message came when all the screens in the house displayed the same image, a photo of Vincent, very much alive, taken just hours earlier with a timestamp that proved he'd somehow survived his own death. The screaming from the surveillance feed was immediate and satisfying. "This isn't happening," Rebecca shrieked, frantically trying to turn off devices that wouldn't respond to any commands. "Dead people don't send photos." Raymond, his medical training making him more analytical even in panic, stared at the image with growing horror. "That's impossible. I checked his pulse myself. He was dead." "Well, he's not dead now," Patricia screamed, throwing a crystal vase at the television. The screen shattered, but Vincent's face remained visible through the spiderweb of cracks, smiling with predatory satisfaction. Emma, awakened by the chaos, appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "What's wrong? Why is everyone yelling?" "Go back to bed," Rebecca snapped, but Emma had already seen her father's face on the broken screen. "Daddy," she gasped, clapping her hands together. "I told you he wasn't really dead. I told you he was coming back." The look of pure joy on his daughter's face, even through the grainy surveillance feed, made Vincent's heart soar. But it also hardened his resolve for what was coming next. Phase 2, he told Miguel through their communication link. It's time for them to understand that death was the easy option. What followed was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Over the next 72 hours, Vincent systematically dismantled the Hoffmans' lives piece by piece, always staying one step ahead, always making them feel his presence without revealing his location. Their bank accounts were frozen when Detective Crawford's investigation revealed the suspicious financial transactions. The estate lawyer who'd helped them forge documents was arrested when Tony provided evidence of his fraud. Judge Morrison's wife discovered, through an anonymous tip, that her book club had been used to spread malicious lies, and her outrage led to Patricia being ostracized from Denver social circles. But the cruelest blow came when Rebecca discovered that her previous husband's deaths were being reinvestigated. Vincent had provided authorities with everything Tony had uncovered about Michael Brennan and Thomas Reed. The perfect murders were no longer perfect, and Rebecca's carefully constructed life as a grieving widow was exposed as a pattern of calculated murder. How was he doing this? Rebecca whispered to her parents during one of their increasingly desperate conversations. "How does he know about Michael and Thomas?" "It doesn't matter how," Raymond replied grimly. "What matters is stopping him before he destroys us completely." "How do you stop a dead man?" Patricia asked, her voice cracking with strain. They had no idea that Vincent was listening to every word, watching every move, anticipating every desperate plan they concocted. The surveillance network Miguel had installed was so comprehensive that Vincent knew what they were thinking almost before they did. The turning point came when Rebecca, driven by desperation and fear, made the worst possible decision. "We have to use Emma," she told her parents during what she thought was a private conversation. "If Vincent is really alive, his weakness is still his daughter. We grab Emma, leave the state, and force him to come to us on our terms." Vincent's blood turned to ice as he listened to them plan to kidnap his daughter. The psychological warfare was over. Now it was time for the kind of justice that didn't require courts or laws. "Tony, Miguel," he said quietly into his communication device. "It's time." That night, as the Hoffmans prepared to flee with Emma, they found their escape routes systematically blocked. Their cars wouldn't start. Miguel had disabled them remotely. The airport had their names flagged for questioning Detective Crawford's influence. The bus station was being watched, Tony's surveillance team. They were trapped in their own house with a 6-year-old girl and the growing certainty that Vincent Torres was coming for them. The front door opened at exactly midnight. Vincent walked into the Hoffman house like an avenging angel, no longer bothering to hide his resurrection. He'd traded his hospital gown for black clothing that made him look like a shadow given human form. Behind him came Tony and Miguel, their faces grim with purpose. "Hello, family," Vincent said pleasantly, as if he had just returned from a business trip instead of rising from the dead. "I believe we have some things to discuss." Patricia fainted immediately. Raymond backed against the wall, his medical mind trying to process how a man he'd personally pronounced dead was standing in his living room. Rebecca clutched Emma protectively, though it was unclear whether she was protecting the child or using her as a shield. "Daddy!" Emma broke free and ran to Vincent, who swept her up in his arms with infinite gentleness. "Hello, sweetheart," he said softly, his voice warm and loving despite the Arctic rage in his eyes when he looked at the others. "Did you miss me?" "I knew you weren't really dead," Emma whispered, hugging him tightly. "I knew you'd come back for me." "I promised I'd always protect you," Vincent replied, kissing her forehead. "And I always keep my promises." He looked at Rebecca over Emma's head, and she physically recoiled from the cold fury in his expression. "Now then," Vincent said conversationally, "shall we discuss attempted murder, insurance fraud, child endangerment, and kidnapping? Or would you prefer to start with the serial killing?" The reckoning had begun, and for the Hoffmans, death would have been a mercy. Chapter 9. Final Justice. Vincent set Emma down gently and gestured for Tony to take her to the kitchen. "Uncle Tony's going to make you some hot chocolate while Daddy talks to Mommy and Grandma and Grandpa. Okay?" Emma nodded, understanding with a child's intuition that adult business was about to happen. As Tony led her away, Vincent's demeanor shifted from loving father to something far more dangerous. "Sit down," he commanded, and the three Hoffmans collapsed into chairs like marionettes with cut strings. "Vincent," Rebecca began, her voice shaking, "I can explain." "You can be quiet," Vincent interrupted, his tone mild but carrying absolute authority. "You've done enough talking. 3 husbands worth by my count." He walked slowly around the living room, his presence dominating the space. "Let me tell you what's going to happen. Detective Crawford is outside with arrest warrants for all 3 of you. Insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and child endangerment to start. But that's just the legal system." Vincent stopped in front of Raymond, studying the broken man who'd helped plan his murder. "You're going to lose your medical consulting license, Raymond. I've already provided evidence of your illegal drug distribution to the state board. Your malpractice insurance is dropping you tomorrow, and every law firm in Colorado will know you're toxic." Raymond's face crumpled as his last professional connections evaporated. "Patricia," Vincent continued, turning to his mother-in-law, "your social circle already knows about your lies and manipulation. But that's just the beginning. The IRS received an interesting tip about unreported income from the liquidation of my first predecessor's business. You'll spend whatever time you don't serve in prison fighting tax evasion charges." Patricia tried to speak, but Vincent's raised hand silenced her. "Rebecca," he said finally, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than any shout. "You're in prison for a very long time. The authorities are reopening Michael's and Thomas's cases with the evidence I provided. Three dead husbands in suspicious circumstances tends to establish a pattern. But Emma, Rebecca started desperately. Emma will never see you again. Vincent cut her off. I have full custody documentation prepared by lawyers who actually passed the bar exam. She'll grow up knowing that her mother was a killer who tried to destroy our family. The defeat in their eyes was complete, but Vincent wasn't finished. However, he continued, prison is a civilized punishment, and what you did to my family was not civilized. Miguel appeared in the doorway, holding a tablet that showed financial records. It's done, he reported. Every account, every asset, every investment, all seized by federal authorities as proceeds from criminal activity. Vincent smiled coldly. You wanted my money? You'll never see a penny. Every dollar you thought you'd stolen is going to a trust fund for Emma's education and therapy. She'll need help recovering from what you've done to her. You can't do this, Raymond whispered. You're not the law. No, Vincent agreed. I'm something much worse. I'm a father protecting his child from monsters who wore the faces of family. The sound of sirens grew closer as Detective Crawford's team surrounded the house. Vincent, Rebecca pleaded one last time. Emma needs her mother. You can't take her away from me. Vincent studied his wife's face. The face he'd once loved, now revealed as a mask hiding a predator. Emma needed a mother. Instead, she got you. But don't worry, she'll have someone who actually loves her. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Maria? It's Vincent. Yes, I'm alive. Long story. I need you to come to Denver immediately. Emma needs you. Maria Castellano, Tony's sister and a pediatric nurse who'd become close to Emma over the years, had already agreed to help raise the child. Unlike Rebecca, Maria understood that love meant protection, not exploitation. As the police flooded into the house, Vincent knelt down to Emma's eye level in the kitchen. Sweetheart, Mommy has to go away for a while. She did some very bad things, and she needs to learn to be better. Emma nodded solemnly. Are you going to be okay, Daddy? You seem different. Vincent's heart clenched. His daughter was so perceptive, picking up on the changes in him that others missed. He was different, harder, colder, more dangerous. But never toward her. I'm going to be fine, he assured her. And you're going to be fine too. Aunt Maria is coming to help take care of you, and we're going to have a good life together. Without Mommy, Vincent chose his words carefully. Mommy made choices that hurt our family. Sometimes when people hurt us badly, we have to protect ourselves by staying away from them. Emma considered this with the seriousness of a much older child. Like when Tommy at school was mean to me, and you said I didn't have to play with him anymore. Exactly like that, Vincent confirmed. Sometimes the people who should love us the most are the ones who hurt us the worst. But that doesn't mean everyone will hurt us. As Rebecca, Patricia, and Raymond were led away in handcuffs, Rebecca screamed one final time, Emma, Mommy loves you. Emma looked at her mother being arrested, then back at Vincent. If she loved me, why did she try to hurt you? The question revealed a wisdom beyond her years, born from trauma, but tempered by her father's love. Some people don't know how to love properly, Vincent explained. But you'll learn the right way. I promise. 6 months later, Vincent stood in his rebuilt auto shop, watching Emma play with a toy car while Maria helped her with homework. The Hoffmans were gone. Rebecca convicted of 3 counts of murder and sentenced to life without parole, Patricia and Raymond serving federal time for conspiracy and fraud. Officer Kelly had testified against them all in exchange for a reduced sentence, though he'd never work in law enforcement again. The corrupt networks they'd used to attack Vincent had been systematically exposed and dismantled. Tony entered the shop, carrying coffee and wearing the satisfaction of a job well done. The last of the appeals was denied, he reported. Rebecca's lawyer tried to claim ineffective counsel, but the judge wasn't buying it. Good, Vincent replied simply. He felt no joy in their destruction, only the cold satisfaction of justice served. Any regrets? Tony asked, studying his old friend's face. Vincent looked at Emma, who was showing Maria a drawing she'd made of their new family. Vincent, herself, Maria, and conspicuously absent figures who'd once been labeled Mommy, Grandma Pat, and Grandpa Ray. No, Vincent said finally. They chose to declare war on my family. I just finished what they started. Emma looked up from her drawing and smiled at him. The same bright, trusting smile she'd always had, unmarked by the trauma her mother's family had tried to inflict. "Daddy, look, I drew us at